Okay, so what we're going to do in this video is we are going to work on our environment a little bit to make our development process a little bit easier. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to install a new package called NodeMon. So in your terminal, in our blockchain directory, we will write npm I nodemon -- save. Now, what this NodeMon library will do for us is that whenever we make a change in one of our files and we save a file, it will automatically restart our server for us so that we don't have to go back and forth from the terminal to our code to restart the server every time we make a change. So to use NodeMon, we are going to open up our package.json, and in this area where it says scripts, we're going to add a new script, and it's going to be called start. And in this script, we are going to write nodemon -- watch dev -e JS. Now, what does all this mean? Well, it's actually pretty simple. What we're saying is when we run this start command, we want NodeMon to watch our dev folder, which is this folder right here, and we want it to keep an eye on all of our JavaScript files, any file that has the extension of JS. And whenever one of these files is changed and the file is saved, we want NodeMon to restart our dev/api.js file for us. And that's it. So we'll save this file. And now whenever we make a change inside of our dev folder and save it, our server will restart itself. So I can show you an example of this right now. So over here in our terminal, we want to start our server using NodeMon now, using this start command. So we will say npm start. And you can see that our server started up because it's listening on port 3000, and it used NodeMon to start up now. Now, whenever we make a change in one of our JavaScript files and save it, we can see that our server restarted itself. So it's listening on port 3000 again. Cool. So this is just a tool that we use to make development a little bit easier for us. Now, one other tool that we want to use is called Postman. And what this Postman tool will do is it will allow us to make calls to any of our post endpoints. And it will allow us to send data into these endpoints with our requests. So you should head over to getpostman.com and download the app. And once you have downloaded the app, we can run through a little test trial of how we can use this Postman app to hit our post-transaction endpoint. So we will open our Postman app after we download it, and this is what it looks like. Now, what we want to do is we want to hit this endpoint as a test. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a post request to http://localhost on port 3000/transaction. And to test to make sure that this endpoint is working, let's send something back in response. So in our endpoint, we will simply write res.send, and we'll send back the text, "It works." Exciting. And we'll save that. And now when we hit this endpoint, we should get the text, "It works" returned to us. Let's see what happens. Cool. So we get the text "It works" sent back to us. Cool. Now, most of the time, when we hit a post endpoint in our API, we are going to want to send data to this endpoint. So for example, when we hit this transaction endpoint, we want to create a new transaction. So we have to send the transaction data to this endpoint. We need to send the amount of the transaction, the sender, and the recipient to this endpoint. So how can we do that? Well, when we use Postman, it's actually pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is we're going to send some information in the body of our post request. So you can click on this body tab right here. And I'm going to delete this for now. And you want to make sure that this raw selection is checked. And you want to make sure that this, where it says text over here, it should be in JSON. Cool. So now let's send some data in with our post request. So all we're going to do is make a JSON object. And let's put some data on this object. So we will say amount of the transaction will be 20 Bitcoin. The sender's address will be this crazy string right here. And actually, we want to remember that this has to be in JSON format. So we need all of our quotations to be double quotes, or it won't work. And we want our recipient to have this address right here. Cool. So how can we test to see if we are receiving all of this information inside of our endpoint? Well, one thing we can do is we can console log out the entire rec body. So the rec body inside of our endpoint, this rec body is simply this object right here. It's the same thing. So when we console log out this rec body, we should see this entire object. And let's also send some different information back in the response. So instead of this text, let's make some text in backticks, and we will say the amount of the transaction is, and we'll do some string interpolation, Bitcoin. And inside of here, we're just going to put our variable rec.body, and on our rec body, we have the amount, sender, and recipient. So we just want to do recBody.amount. Cool. So now, when we hit this endpoint, we should get the entire rec body logged out inside of our terminal. And as a response, in Postman, we should get the text, the amount of the transaction is 20 Bitcoin. So let's give this a try and see what we get. Oh, so I have to go back. I have to remember to save this file. Cool. Now let's give it a try. Okay. So it looks like we got some error. And the error is cannot read property amount of undefined. And we can see that error in our terminal as well. So what is this error that we're getting? Well, this error is actually pretty straightforward to solve, and it's something we should expect to get at this point. The problem is that we need to install another library in order to access this information. So let's do that now. So back in our terminal, we're going to quit this process, and we're going to install a package called body parser. So we're going to say npm I body-parser-save, and we're going to run that. Cool. Now let's start up our server again with npm start. Okay, so now to use body parser, we simply want to import it at the top of our file by saying const body parser equals require body parser. And to use this body parser library right here, we are going to say app.use body parser.json and app.use body parser.url encoded with extended false. Cool. So basically, all these two lines are doing is they're saying, if a request comes in with JSON data or with form data, we simply want to parse that data so that we can access it in any of these routes. So any route we hit, our data is first going to go through the body parser so we can access the data, and then we can use the data in whichever endpoint will be receiving it. Cool. So at this point, now that we're using body parser, we should be able to access the amount on the rec body. So let's save this file and let's try to send this request again. Perfect. We got the string returned that says the amount of the transaction is 20 Bitcoin, which is correct. Cool. And in our terminal, since we logged out the entire rec body, we can see the whole rec body logged out right here with the amount, sender, and recipient. Cool. That's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to start building out our blockchain endpoint. See you there. And one more thing that I want to mention is that throughout the rest of this section, you should always have our server running, which means you should always run this npm start command so that we can use our API and hit the different endpoints and test it and mess around with it and see if it works. So throughout the rest of this section, you should always have our npm start command running. Cool. See you in the next video.